I worked near her for 7 years, close enough to sort her correspondence, close enough to know which letters she read twice and which ones she set aside without finishing. The letter from Alfred Hitchcock she read 3 times. Then she folded it, placed it in the drawer beside her writing desk, and said nothing for the rest of the morning. I never saw her take it out again, but I know she never threw it away. Some things a woman keeps, not because she intends to act on them, because she cannot bring herself to let go. The world understood the story simply. Grace Kelly left Hollywood to become a princess. She chose love over career. She chose Monaco over the screen. It was the most romantic decision of the 20th century, and the press recorded it as such. That version is not wrong. It is simply incomplete in a way that changes everything. Grace. Patricia Kelly was 26 years old when she married Prince Rainier of Monaco in April 1956. At that point, she had won an Academy Award. She had appeared in 3 Alfred Hitchcock films. She was, by every credible measure, the most sought-after actress in Hollywood. Directors competed for her. Studios negotiated for her. The industry watched what she did next. What she did next was leave. The official record describes this as her choice, and in the narrow technical sense, it was no one placed a contract in front of her and demanded a signature. No one issued an ultimatum she was required to acknowledge in writing, but the palace had its requirements. Requirements that existed before she arrived and would exist long after. A Princess of Monaco did not appear on cinema screens. She did not deliver other men's dialogue to other men's cameras. She did not allow the public to watch her inhabit a character that was not herself. Prince Rainier made this clear, not loudly, not with confrontation. The way powerful men make things clear to women who have agreed to enter their world through the gradual arrangement of circumstances, until the original question no longer needs to be asked. In the first year of their marriage, he arranged for her films to be banned from cinemas in Monaco. Not all films, her films specifically. The woman the Monegasques were now expected to love, as their princess could not be watched on screen, playing characters of a different kind, she was told. This was a matter of dignity, of protocol. She accepted it the way she accepted most things in those early years, with the particular silence of someone who has not yet understood the full dimensions of the agreement they have signed. I arrived as her personal secretary in 1958, 2 years after the wedding, long enough after for the adjustments to have been made, for the Grace Kelly who had existed before Monaco to have been quietly, systematically removed. What remained was Princess Grace, elegant, dutiful, present at every function, absent from herself. In the spring of 1962, Alfred Hitchcock wrote to her. I was the one who opened the correspondence that morning's standard procedure, sorting by sender and subject before placing items on her desk for review. His name was not unusual to encounter in her mail. Old colleagues wrote occasionally. Industry figures sent greetings on birthdays and at Christmas. But this letter was different in weight and length. I knew, before I had finished the first paragraph, what it contained. He was making a film called Marnie, the story of a compulsive thief, a woman of secrets. A character built on damage and concealment, and the specific intelligence of someone who survives by being underestimated. He wanted Princess Grace for the title role. I placed it at the top of the day's correspondence. She read it at her desk, at the window that overlooked the palace gardens. I was present arranging items on the side table. Close enough to observe without appearing to watch, she read it once quickly. Then she went back to the beginning and read it again. Slowly this time. The way she read things she was considering seriously. She set it down, picked up her coffee, put it down again without drinking. Then she read the letter a third time. I had worked near her for 4 years by then, long enough to understand what the third reading meant. It meant the answer forming inside her was not the answer she would be permitted to give. She looked up and asked me to find out what her schedule was for the following month, not to respond to Hitchcock, not to consult with Rainier to check her schedule. It was the kind of displacement that people use when they need to be doing something with their hands, while their mind settles into a decision that has already been made for them. I left the room. When I came back, 10 minutes later with her calendar, she had moved the letter to the side of the desk. Not filed, not discarded, simply moved. She did not raise the subject that day. She raised it with Rainier 3 days later. I know this because I was outside the door when their voices changed. Register that particular shift in tone that meant the conversation had moved from the surface of things to somewhere underneath. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. I counted. When she came out, she walked past me with the expression she wore to official functions: composed, correct, arranged. She didn't mention the letter again for 6 weeks. 6 weeks later, she told me what had happened. Not directly. She never spoke directly about the palace's decisions. She had learned early that direct speech left records in memory, in the minds of those who heard it. And Princess Grace was careful about records, she said. Instead, "I have written to Mr. Hitchcock to decline," I said. I was sorry to hear it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He will find someone. He always finds someone." There was no bitterness in the way she said it. That was the most difficult thing about working near her, the absence of bitterness. A bitter person is asking for something. A person who has moved past bitterness has already stopped asking. She had decided, or had been made, to decide that the role did not belong to her life anymore. That the version of herself who would have played Marnie had remained in Hollywood in 1956, along with the rest of what she had been before. What I understood that morning, standing in that room with the window light coming through the curtains, she had chosen herself as one of her small acts of personalization in a palace that had existed long before her and would exist long after, was this. The palace had not taken her career in a single moment. There had been no confrontation, no decree, no document she could have refused to sign. It had been removed piece by piece. First the ban on her films, then the understanding that acting was incompatible with her role. Then the arrangements of daily life that left no space for the consideration of another kind of existence. Then finally, the moment when Hitchcock called and the answer was already written before she had finished reading the question. She had been managed, precisely, quietly, with the full sophistication of an institution that had been arranging women's lives for centuries. She was Grace Kelly. She was the most naturally gifted film actress of her generation. According to Hitchcock himself, who was not given to generosity about the talent of others, she played Marnie in her imagination, I think. In the way people play the lives they were not permitted to live in the hours before sleep, in the silences during official functions, in the third reading of a letter, they know they will have to sit down. The role went to Tippi Hedren. The film was released in 1964. Princess Grace attended the Monaco Red Cross Gala that year. In a white gown, she smiled at every camera. She had learned by then to arrange her face before entering rooms. The Hitchcock letter was not the last time the question arose. In 1977, director Herbert Ross approached her for a part in The Turning Point. Rainier dismissed the idea before it reached the stage of formal consideration. There was no letter this time, no 3 readings. The answer arrived before the question had been properly formed. She did not mention it to me. I heard it from another member of the household. The speed of the dismissal was itself the message. What the public did not see in those years was the specific quality of what had been removed, not the career itself. Careers end, roles pass to younger actresses, the industry moves on. What had been removed was the permission to be witnessed, to stand in front of a camera and be seen in the full complexity of what she was capable of feeling and expressing and becoming. The work of acting, at its most serious, is the work of being a complete human being in public. She had been extraordinary at it, and it had been taken from her at 26 in its place. The functions, the galas, the charity committees, the Red Cross, the carefully worded speeches she delivered in French that she had learned phonetically at first and fluently later, though always with an accent that reminded everyone in the room that she had not been born to this. She built a life from what remained. She was not passive. She established the Princess Grace Foundation. She preserved Belle Epoque architecture. She hosted American Week annually. In the Principality, she raised 3 children in a palace that had not been designed for warmth, but she had been an artist. And artists who are prevented from making work do not simply redirect that energy into other channels. They carry it, quietly, precisely, for the rest of their lives. I saw her once, late in the 1960s, watching a film in the small private screening room at the palace. Alone, she didn't know I had passed the door. She was watching Rear Window, one of hers, one of the banned ones. She sat completely still. Her face in the light from the screen was the face of someone watching a version of themselves that no longer existed. I did not disturb her. Some things a woman keeps. Not because she intends to act on them, because she cannot bring herself to let go. Here is what I came to understand. In 7 years of proximity, Grace Kelly did not regret Monaco. I want to be precise about this, because the simpler story that she was a tragic prisoner, that she longed to escape, that she spent her years in mourning for Hollywood is not accurate. She loved her children. She found meaning in her work for the Principality. She was not a woman who had been destroyed. She was something more complicated than that. She was a woman who had been divided. The Grace Kelly, who existed before 1956, the actress, the artist, the woman Hitchcock called the most naturally gifted he had ever directed. That woman did not disappear entirely. She was simply placed in a room that no one was permitted to enter, including, eventually, Grace herself. The palace had required her to become Princess Grace, and Princess Grace was a magnificent creation, poised, charitable, gracious in the precise original sense of that word. She performed the role with the same intelligence and discipline she had brought to every role before it. The difference was that this role had no last day of filming, no wrap party, no moment when the director said cut and she could return to herself. This was the role until the end. She died in September 1982. She was 52 years old. She had been Princess of Monaco for 26 years, exactly as long as she had been Grace Kelly before the marriage. The world mourned the princess. What I mourned quietly, and without speaking of it to anyone, was the actress. The woman who had read a letter 3 times and known the answer before she had finished reading. The woman who had sat alone in a darkened room watching her own face on a screen. Watching the version of herself the palace had decided Monaco did not need. That woman never made another film. The palace never mentioned it. If this story is difficult to sit with, it was difficult to witness. Subscribe to the Crown Vault, where the stories the palace never wanted told finally come to light in our next video. Grace Kelly was not the only woman the Grimaldi Palace required to disappear. Princess Stephanie was told at 18 years old. that the version of herself she intended to become was incompatible with the crown. What happened in the years that followed is a story the palace has never told in full.